everybody, and welcome to the Aggieville Alleycats podcast, where come rain, shine, or anything in between, we're here to deliver to you the Kansas State sporting news that you so love. I'm Mace Edwards, right alongside
Connor Baltazar.
And, well, that was one of the ugliest games I've ever seen.
There's no better way to put it. It was one of the most frustrating victories one could ask for.
Yeah, if you ever want a perfect example of the games that I call rock fights, yeah. This and Iowa, Illinois are the perfect example of what I call rock fights. It's just two people bashing each other over the head with rocks, and yet somehow still like bashing their hands occasionally.
Very little productive is happening, but there are certainly things that are happening. So,
yes, very true. But that's just how Farmaggedon goes sometimes. For the unfamiliar, K-State won 10-9, which looks like your college baseball score, but Iowa State doesn't have baseball, so it tells you it's football. So like we said, the game was gross, and we'll get more into it in the general takeaways, but a win's a win, and great teams find a way to win the ugly ones, especially the ugly ones on the road. I just wish it wasn't ugly.
Yeah, I definitely wish this game was a little easier on the eyes, a little less stressful. Probably took another year off my life. I'm used to it at this point, I guess. But a win is a win. And I mean, I think Iowa State's kind of really proven themselves as having the best defense in the Big 12. They've done a phenomenal job this year in limiting opponents. Baylor's the only team that really had any offensive success against them, and that wasn't even yardage wise. They just took advantage of the few opportunities they had. Like KU's had a very explosive offense all year, and Iowa State completely nullified that offense. I mean, Jalen Daniels was under 100 total yards in that game, I think, or was very close to being under it. And we know that Jalen Daniels has been very dangerous this year. So K-State, yeah, they only get 10 points, but they still have an explosive offensive performance. We'll get more into that later. But it was a great performance by the Iowa State defense, but not quite enough.
Yeah. But with this victory, K-State moves to number 17 in the country going into their bye week. But now let's go into the general takeaways. And the first thing that's of note is that there were so many times that we just could not get out of our own way. Like this is a game that if we would have lost it, and I know this is going to sound very diminutive, but I don't have to worry about like last year, a bunch of Iowa State fans listening to this episode to gloat. We don't have to worry about this year. So if we would have lost this game, it's because we would have lost, not because Iowa State would have won. And there are multiple times that I went to Kites with the Shake and Blake boys. Shout out Blake and John. They're excellent to watch the game with. But there were several times in the game that the entire bar went from one collective expletive to complete silence for like 10 minutes at a time. Except for the group of very inebriated women next to us. They really kept the spirit going.
Every group needs that. I can tell you it was just me and my girlfriend watching it, and we had a very similar experience to that, honestly, where we would get really excited for a bit and then nothing would happen for like 10 minutes. At least like frustration would set in for 10 minutes. There were definitely a lot of times we couldn't get out of our own way. There were a lot of things to like, honestly, like subtly about how the offense played, specifically, and I think how he schemed. A lot of people are upset, I feel like, with Colin Klein after this game. I am not one of those people. I think he actually called a pretty good game. Execution was just the biggest issue, I'd say. And then also Iowa State's defense just being good is another thing, which again, like I don't want to step on the toes of things we'll get into later. But yeah, there were multiple times where we definitely could have done more with the opportunities that we had. The missed field goal,
the event,
fumble, the incident,
as we will call it.
The incident that occurred at one point. A lot of things that were frustrating about this game. But that's just kind of how football goes. Iowa State, they had their own frustrations, like the big drop at the end of the game. Like that just like to me, I see it as a trade-off. They have that just inexplicably not go their way. Same thing for us, really. So
They had their best player lose them the game, and that is one of the most Iowa State things that could have possibly happened.
I would expect nothing less from Iowa State in a big game than to have someone they thought they could rely on just completely mess it up.
Yeah, like someone who is fighting for, probably the second best receiver in the conference, because I really think that there's a fight between Marvin Mims and Xavier Hutchinson. I really think both are NFL guys. I'd probably give Marvin Mims the edge. Quentin Johnston is just different. And I'm every single week, I think it's every single week that has gone by, Quentin Johnston has just slowly becomes like, all right, well, yeah, no, you're not covering that guy. That sucks.
That's going to be a nightmare to figure out. Luckily, we get 2 weeks.
Yeah, luckily, we get 2 weeks, and we also have a corner that is as tall as him. So
Yeah, Julius is I'm not even going to say best. I'm going to say the only matchup for Quentin Johnston at this level of football. So we're lucky there. Assuming that we apply it well and Julius plays a good game, we're a ways out from that. We'll have to study some film too, but we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, there were just times, especially on offense, we just weren't getting out of our own way. And there were times in the game, especially in the first quarter, and this was probably the most frustrating thing for me. There were times that Hunter Deckers, now granted, he never looked good, do not misunderstand me, but I think Hunter Deckers is probably the worst quarterback in the Big 12. I don't think I'm going to get much pushback on that, mostly because, again, Iowa State fans are not listening to this episode. But he's God. The amount of competency that he showed, it's strange, especially because I really thought that this would be a game that, granted, we held Hunter Deckers under 200 yards. This isn't like a full game note. It's more first quarter thing. So we made an adjustment. Hunter Deckers didn't play an awful game, but he didn't play a good one by any means at all. 0 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. But do you agree with that? It was just more of a first quarter thing, and then he turned into Hunter Deckers of old?
I definitely agree with that. First quarter Iowa State offense versus rest of the game Iowa State offense is completely different. The defense, just like I think probably a lot of what happens in the first quarter there is Iowa State had a game script and they attacked the defense in the way that they wanted to. Josh Hayes kind of saved us a few times in that first quarter. He came out of that first quarter with 8 tackles, I believe.
Yep.
Which was absolutely ludicrous. But yeah, the Iowa State offense definitely much more successful in that first quarter. It felt like, at least, than the rest of the game. But yeah, Hunter Decker still finishes under 200 passing yards on 38 attempts, under 60% completion percentage. Had at least one pass that probably should have been intercepted. I'm thinking of the Austin Moore deflection. If our safety's in just slightly better position, then that's probably a pick off the deflection. But yeah, he did have one big run where he got like 24 yards. Other than that, he didn't really do anything in the ground game either.
That one run very much upset me. I'm not gonna lie.
I wholeheartedly agree. That was such a deflating run, and they didn't do anything with it. So
we literally always, like, every single time we have mentioned on the show is like, oh, this quarterback doesn't have plus mobility. Every single time we end up giving him like a 3rd and 14 because the coaching staff agrees, and we just break contain and they break free, and we don't have a spy on them because we're playing blitz 0.
Yeah,
which is a shame. That could have happened to anybody, but
it really could have.
And it does happen to everybody, unless you're Georgia. But Georgia's defense is cheating. So
yeah, that's not a fair comparison.
Not literally, but basically. The next one is that you kind of touched on it a little bit. Is the offense was more mired in its own execution issues, not necessarily play calling issues. There are a lot of times that on paper the play calls should have worked. Keenan Garber probably should win. If you get a one-on-one as a quarterback, like you get pure one-on-one coverage, and it's the alert route, which most of the time is a go, you are taught to throw the alert. If Keenan Garber fights through contact a little bit better, I'm not even saying if he gets a little bit more separation, but if he's able to kind of work through the defenders, at worst, it's a PI ball for K-State. Like that's frustrating. On the rollout pass, the sprint out pass, we probably should have blocked Will McDonald. That's probably
I
something we should have
I
done.
think that's a great offensive strategy is to block the great pass rusher, but we failed to do that twice. So
Yeah, and a lot of those come down to not necessarily them being schematically bad play calls. It's more execution. And also shout out to Adrian Martinez for making the most of two broken plays, one to Phillip Brooks and the other being the incident that we will not be talking about until later. But yeah, what do you have any thoughts on that?
yeah, I kind of touched on this earlier. Yeah, uh, I do think a lot of people are probably displeased with Colin Klein after this. I'm not really. Um, I don't think that this was a bad call by Colin Klein. At least for most of the game. A lot of times we were going with stuff that in any against any other defense in the Big 12, I think works. Um, and a lot of this is not just execution issues on our part, which some of it was. Some of it is just Iowa State having a really great tackling defense. They were making some shoestring tackles that were turning a potential 20 to 30 yard gain into a no gain, 1-2 yard gain. Deuce had many lanes that most games against most teams, he is hitting the hole and bursting and getting a chunk play. And Iowa State was just stopping that from happening with they were pretty much just relying on their last line of defense to make sound tackles, and that happened. And then QB power wasn't really working as much as it has been the last few weeks. Even when we had numbers, they were just making great defensive plays to stop it from getting worse. So again, I'm not gonna get up here and get upset with Colin Klein for calling a play when the numbers are to his favor, because in theory that's going to work. But Iowa State just played great defense. And I also liked that we were attacking downfield heavily compared to how we had been the rest of the year. We only completed 2 of them. One of them was a pass interference. Keenan Garber was another one. I think that there were a couple others that just weren't converted. But we were going downfield more this game, and we have really the rest of the year. And Adrian Martinez, uh, it's obvious now that he can definitely do it.
Yeah,
There was
the arm
speculation at
strength's
times that he
not the
couldn't.
issue.
Yeah, arm strength was not the issue. We clearly had something schematically that we were trying to exploit, and it worked once, almost worked twice. We'll get into that later. And I liked our game plan for the most part, which was attack deep, and try and get the outside run established, which again, we've not been able to establish outside run against anybody really this year. It feels like just anytime we try and run a sweep, it just gets blown up for like a 3 or 4 yard loss. But I don't know. The scheme was not the issue. Offensive line, I kind of had a rough day again. This is probably the worst stretch for the offensive line since 2020, I'd say. But the only way is up for that unit, I'd say right now. And they're dealing with a ton of injuries. A lot of guys are banged up, so I'm not going to harp on it too much. But yeah, execution definitely a problem. Definitely not upset with Klein, and that's not us being like homers for Klein. We have definitely gone after Colin Klein at times this season. This was a good call, or this was a good game for Colin Klein. I'd say just the execution just was not there for the most part.
Yeah. Yeah, we've definitely but despite all of the offensive issues we had, it seems like a common reprieve every single week. Yeah, our defense they're so good. They're and as they're good in a way that that really can only be explained through superlatives. So as much as, Connor and I would really love to explain like, oh, here is schematically why this play calling works. Here is why Joe Klanderman called this play call, and here's why he called it. Here's why that is a smart play call. Here is why Drake Cheatham played this particular type of coverage and why he was in this position and why it was the perfect position. Yeah, we could do that, but that'd just be wasting everyone's time because it almost doesn't matter because just about every single time the defense plays, other than once or two, like one or two times a game, they have the right answer, and they get the answers when they need them most in clutch situations. So, yeah, we could spend 80 years talking about this defense schematically, but what's the point when we could just say it's excellent, it's awesome, it's great, amazing defense. It's probably it's the best that I've seen from K-State in my time as a K-State fan, and it's probably one of the best defenses I've seen from a team I support in college. I grew up an MU fan, leave me alone. But yeah, do you have any thoughts on that?
Um, yeah. The defense really, really, really stepped up when we needed them, which was pretty much the entire game. Down the stretch, especially when they retired, we'd had several players injured. Felix was playing through pain. Khalid Duke had been out the entire game, so Desmond Purnell was playing for him. Guys retired. Like, guys are playing through injury, and they still were stepping up and making big plays, creating pressure, making big run stops. And it was really excellent to watch. The defense had a phenomenal performance post first quarter, and even in the first quarter, they weren't awful. They only gave up 3 points, so they did a great job down the stretch, especially considering some of the field position that they had to deal with. I mean, there were multiple Iowa State drives that started almost at midfield, if not better, that K-State was able to hold and prevent from turning into touchdowns, or most of the time even field goals. So it was really, really, really impressive to watch the defense be able to step up time after time after time and make those stops and prevent Iowa State from really getting the ball rolling. Pretty much at any point in the second half. It was very impressive. Only 78 rushing yards on the day for Iowa State. Jarrell Brock kind of playing through injury. Deion Silas, though, he was healthy. He only had 7 carries, which is kind of strange. And then Deckers had the 2 sacks and the 1 run. Really, the only player that gashed the defense at all was Xavier Hutchinson, who had 100 yards receiving on 8 catches, but he had his own issues. So great all-around performance by the defense. Some great individual performances as well. A few that we can highlight later, but yeah. A lot to love about how this defense is playing right now.
Yep. Now let's move into the stats portion of the day. And again, because we are top tier professionals, Connor, do you want offensive or defensive stats?
I'm trying to remember what I did last time.
You did defense last time.
I'll do offense this time.
Cool.
Okay. Offensively, K-State, as we all know, did not have a phenomenal day whatsoever. Some context will be applied to that, though. Some perspective. In game day grades, though, I have some numbers that Ace will hate just because they're numbers, not because they're bad. But
yeah, I hate numbers.
So passing, we actually have 2 guys here. Adrian Martinez goes 12 of 19, which is the same completion log that he had against Texas Tech, but he went for significantly more yards with 246, which is the best passing performance he's had all year. Add a touchdown on a long 81-yard pass. He was sacked 3 times as well. And then today he also had his best yards per attempt by far on the year, almost 13 yards per attempt, which was better than his previous best of 6.9 against OU. Then Malik Knowles had 1 for 1 for 11 yards on a pass that was caught by Adrian Martinez. All right, I guess.
Okay, but why?
I think that's a fair reaction. Like we did it and it worked. And I don't know. It's just very unusual for K-State to pull a trick play out. Like we haven't seen many since the infamous Colin Klein behind the back pass to Chris Harper. I would laugh very hard if he tried to do that again sometime, but like call it. I think that'd be really funny. So you should consider that. But yeah, that's it for passing. Getting to rushing, Adrian Martinez leads here as well. 19 carries for 77 yards, a long of 19, averaging 4.1 yards per carry. No touchdowns on the ground, so kind of coming back to earth there. DJ Giddens, actually the second leading rusher, 8 rushing attempts for 32 yards. Did not ever lose yards, averaged 4 yards per attempt, and had a phenomenal final drive where he ran really well. Where on that last drive, he had 16 of his 32 yards in the entire game. And really, and he sealed the game on that 2nd and 2. Then after that, Deuce Vaughn, not a great day for him. 10 rushes for 23 yards, averaging 2.3 per attempt. Definitely his worst game of the year. Granted, he was injured and we hardly saw him in the 4th quarter. Hopefully not too serious. Doesn't really sound like it's too serious. Because he was walking around and came back into the game at least briefly. But yeah, Deuce definitely could have had more than that 23. A lot of times was just one ankle tackle away from breaking off a big gain, but just still, he didn't put together a very good game statistically, especially by his standards. By anybody's standards, really, this isn't a very good game. But moving into receiving, Phillip Brooks had 4 receptions for 119 yards and a touchdown. Of course, the 81-yard score. He, for I think almost a full quarter, was the only K-State player to register a catch. I think he was actually, yes. Where he was responsible for all of Adrian's passing yards, and he had 100 yards after the first quarter. Ends up with 119, and the only touchdown of the entire game. Blake Knowles has 5 catches for 108 yards, a long of 68. We will be coming back to that 68-yarder in game day grades. The incident. Deuce Vaughn had 2 catches for 14 yards, along with 8. Adrian, he certainly had a reception, 1 catch for 11 yards. It was fine. He did catch it. Good for him. Benson had 1 catch for 5 yards on a little, I think it was a hook route or maybe like a
stick. It was a stick route.
Same difference.
Yeah.
You elitist.
Yes, me, elitist.
And then Keenan Garber and Cade Warner, they were both targeted once, I believe, and neither came away with a reception. So that does it for the offensive stats, unless you want to include like field goals, which Chris Tennant went 1 for 2, missed from 33, made from 30. And he made an extra point.
Yeah.
Solid. Wish he would have made both, but
well. I'm not gonna lie, my stomach kind of sank a little bit after we missed the first one.
Yeah, that was rough. I actually thought he made it on
I
first
did too.
glance. I thought it went in, but it just barely missed, I think. Yeah. So which was a shame. I really thought it went in, and I just didn't notice until the officials called it. But the second one was perfect.
Yeah,
second one was right down the middle.
Yep. Now on defense, going through by most tackles, Josh Hayes was the leading tackler, including 8 in the first quarter. He had 11 total, 1 TFL, 1 pass breakup. Then the machine, Austin Moore, with his powerful first name, had 6 tackles, 1 TFL, and 2 pass breakups. Kobe Savage had 5 tackles, Sincere Mason 5, Julius Brents 5, Drake Cheatham 4. Des Purnell had himself a pretty good game in relief for Khalid Duke. He had 3 tackles and 2 pass break, like 2 PBUs. Honestly, even if Khalid Duke is healthy, I think Des Purnell has earned himself more playing time just by virtue of this performance.
100% agree.
Yeah. Then TJ Smith had 2 tackles. Daniel Green had 2 tackles and a QB hit. Echo Island had 2 tackles and what should be credited as a PBU because, he's the reason why that slant to Xavier Hutchinson wasn't caught. Or maybe it was like just a speed in, but who cares? Felix had 2 tackles, including 1 sack. Eli Huggins had 2 tackles. Shane Porter, Seth Porter, VJ Payne, and Matthew Mashmeyer each had 1 tackle. Brendan Mott had a sack and a QB hit. Randon Plattner, Cody Stufflebean, Nick Allen, and Jalen Pickle all had a tackle. So pretty good day. Obviously, you get the leading tackler of Josh Hayes, but I keep thinking every single week, okay, Austin Moore is gonna go back to earth. Like he's gonna have just like an all right game. And then he just doesn't. And then he just turns into like the most reliable player on our defense. And it doesn't make sense. I love it, but it doesn't make sense.
No, yeah, it definitely does not make any sense at all, but I'm going to allow it to continue happening. Um,
Yeah.
he has been absolutely excellent. He had a great pass breakup in the latter half of the game. I don't remember exactly when. It could have been intercepted if our safety was in a slightly different spot, but I'm not going to get upset about it. It's just I wish it would have happened.
No, okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I have to gush about this play because there's this is one of those times where it's going to be a brain scrunkly for me about how this was played. So if I'm remembering the play correctly, which I hope I am, because otherwise this is going to be an insane ramble that doesn't make any sense for anyone that has all 22.
Hint, hint.
Hint, hint. But basically, what Iowa State was doing was they were running a flood concept to that side, where the entire play design is based off of that out route getting open against the particular look that K State was running, which, to my best knowledge, was either quarters or cover 3, which is why Drake Cheatham was playing as far back as he was on this play. At least I believe it was Drake Cheatham. So the reason why Drake Cheatham wasn't in position for that interception was because he was cleared out by a go ball, because that's how the play design was. That play design is specifically made for that out route to be open. Austin Moore had no reason to be there. He just was. Like, there is nothing in the scheme or that coverage call that says Austin Moore is going to be that zone defender. And yet, lo and behold, because he is Austin Moore and he's like 5 your next line will be he's just chilling out there and comes up with the pass deflection.
He had no reason to even be close to make that play.
No, he didn't.
And it was just an unbelievably athletic play by Austin Moore.
Absolutely. Yeah, so thank you for indulging my brain scrunkly.
You are welcome. It was very valuable.
But now we can go into game day grades, where we go look at every single position group, including the coordinators, giving them a grade from F to A plus. A plus meaning they nearly single-handedly won us the game, and F meaning they near single-handedly lost us the game. So let's start with the quarterbacks, and we'll flip it up this week. You can go first after I announce the position. So
Very
what did
well.
you give the quarterbacks?
I gave Adrian Martinez an A minus for this game. I really liked what Adrian was doing for most of this game. And I also am curving a little bit here for Adrian, given the quality of defense that he was facing. I was not as kind to the rest of the offense, but I feel like Adrian had a really great game in his own right. And then I do also want to provide perspective on his performance. Adrian had 246 passing yards, which was a season best for him, but that's not the perspective that I want to provide specifically. The one I want to provide specifically is that that's actually a season worst for Iowa State defensively to give up. I don't remember exactly who was next closest. I think it was Baylor. I think because it was Blake Shapen with 238. But Adrian Martinez comes out and has a great day. And then also on that note, K-State rushing wise, which is more of a running back thing, but Adrian led in rushing, so I'm going to include it here. He had 77 yards. Team had 131 yards. That was also a season worst for Iowa State's defense. So did the offense perform great? No, they did not. But this was the best any offense did against Iowa State's defense all season long. And that's through 6 weeks. So we're starting to really see what that team is. And it's a defensive juggernaut. And so I am not going to, when I give not as great grades for the rest of the offense, it is not because I think that they would necessarily be this bad against anybody else. There were frustrations, and at the end of the day, if they don't execute, they don't execute. But I do want to just consider how good the Iowa State defense is, because I don't think K-State fans are fully aware of that, because I was not. I knew they were good. I did not realize that they were this good statistically. So I just want to provide that perspective. Adrian gets an A- because I liked that he was being aggressive downfield, even if there was some frustration with the receivers getting open, which sometimes they were open, to their credit, but not always. He did solid running the ball. Some of the calls I thought were good with him running the ball, even if they didn't work. But all around, Adrian Martinez, I thought a good game. So A- for me.
Yeah, I ended up giving him an A. And, the same criticism that I applied to him last week still applies, to where he's still not throwing with the greatest degree of anticipation. But then again, against this defense, he has an excuse, because against almost every other defense, you can't anticipate and expect someone to be open. Can't do that against this one. That's how they burn you. That Austin Moore play that I just gushed about, that's Iowa State's defense. They put players where they shouldn't be to make plays to trick you. You can't throw with anticipation against this team, because they will kill you. But I ended up giving him an A and not an A+, because, again, deep ball was working really, really well. The only complaint that I have is not his pocket mobility, because that was awesome, but there are a couple of times that I felt like he was getting too lateral when he was running, as in he wanted to run more side to side as opposed to just like going straight through. And part of that is probably because he was admittedly taking a little bit of a beating back there, and he probably thought that he could get more yards if he ran laterally. Sometimes you have to lose great ground to gain ground. But those are such minor complaints. I ended up just giving him an A, and it was pretty much the closest that he could have gotten to an A+ without actually getting one.
Yep. So now we can move on to running backs. I agonized. I won't say that's a strong word. I thought about this hard. But because again, I was considering the opponent, but I'm sadly giving a C+ to this group. I'm disappointed to do it. TJ Giddens did perform well in the little that we saw of him, at least on the last drive specifically. Deuce didn't have the greatest day. He did have a few runs where he nearly broke it, and it was sometimes tackles that I think he might have been able to break against most other opponents, but he just wasn't quite able to. Is it unfortunate? Yes, but they didn't perform to the expectation that we need from them. Deuce did do a little damage in the receiving game. He had one nice catch on the sideline and had another reception. He gets 14 yards there, so there's that at least. But definitely need to see more from the running game. If this was any other opponent, they probably do worse than a C+, honestly.
Yeah.
Because I expect a lot more from this group. But C+ for just the quality of defense that you're seeing.
Yeah. I originally was teasing giving them like a C or a C+, but what changed my mind was actually that final drive by DJ Giddens. And I know you look at it as like, oh, he got 32 yards on the game. How does that bump them up any? I ended up giving them a B, not only because I think they did exactly what they could with what they were given, because I love Deuce. Deuce is not Barry Sanders. I always get those two confused, which, knowing their personalities, they'd probably smack me once each, but just for confusing the two. But they did exactly what they could with what they were given. Deuce, he was an ankle tackle, a shoestring tackle away from breaking a few runs, but he played everything about as well as he could have. There was no time that I was looking at it as like, oh, damn, you should have like hit that hole. There was no times that DJ Giddens was playing where I was like, oh, well, he missed a hole here. DJ Giddens actually impressed me. Every time I see DJ Giddens, I'm thinking like, okay, I know we have Deuce Vaughn on the team, but it doesn't mean that Deuce can't go to the sideline to get a little drink of water every once in a while, especially if we're going to be running with power. Because DJ Giddens runs mad. He runs angry. But yeah, I ended up giving the running backs a B just because they did pretty much all that they could with what they were given.
Yeah. I gave the wide receivers. Well, first I want to explain because this was probably the most difficult grade to give out in a while, and we all know why. So first off, Phillip Brooks, solid game, great game. 4 catches, 119 yards. Does a lot of his damage early. He has a long touchdown that proved to be the difference. He was really good. And then Malik Knowles, 5 catches, 108 yards, and the crucial fumble.
The incident.
That nearly broke me as a fan. I can't recall. I sat here before the episode trying to think of the last time I was that upset with a K-State player in a single game, and I cannot think of it for the life of me. The last time I was that annoyed and frustrated and upset with a K-State player in a game, given the pressure of the situation, how close the game was, and just the sheer horrible nature of the mistake. Because it's a lazy mistake. To be fair, great effort play by Iowa State's defense there. I think it was Anthony Johnson that made the play. But that's laziness on Malik's part. Finish the run. And even if he recovers it in the end zone, I'm not as upset as I am. But I was so upset after this happened. It was one of the most frustrating things I've ever seen live in a K-State game from a single play. If he gets one more yard and makes it into the end zone, Malik and Phil in a vacuum, those two alone. If Malik just makes it the one extra yard, then that's an A game for those two combined.
They may get an A plus, honestly.
Yeah, they actually probably would for basically being the difference. But then you have to take everything else into account. The first thing is if your name was not Phillip Brooks or Malik Knowles, you did not register a statistic in this game. Cade Warner and Keenan Garber were targeted, did not make receptions. RJ Garcia saw the field, but did not get targeted. So that takes, in my book, 2/3 of a letter grade away from the A. That's a B plus. Malik's single instance with that issue, the incident, the fumble, that takes away a full letter grade from the receivers. I give him a C plus, and honestly, that might be generous after how upset I am with Malik, but I didn't want to ruin Phillip Brooks's good night. And also, to be fair to Malik, outside of that terrible play, he honestly had a pretty solid game. He had some nice catches on the sideline and did some things well and made some nice effort plays. He clearly was trying to clear his good name after the unfortunate incident. So I give them a C plus. Part of it is Malik fighting back and trying to clear the bounty off his head, and then Phillip having a really nice day. But this is one of the strangest grades I've had to give out, I feel like, because I just don't know what grade they truly deserve for this game, because everything was just so wildly different from player to player. It would be more fair to go through and give Phillip like an A plus, Malik an A, then include the fumble and give him like an F, and then give everybody else an F for doing nothing. Like at least statistically, there was some solid run blocking here and there, but receiving wise, they didn't do a whole lot. C plus at the end of the day. That's a lot of words to basically say they came out to about average. So you can say, well, you have whatever you want now, but Just pure laziness on Malik's part. I'm going to avoid going on this rant because we'd be here a while, but
we kind of had the rant yesterday when we were talking about the game through Snapchat.
yeah.
I So I'll start with the good. I full disclosure, I ended up giving them a C. We'll start with the good. This is the first time that K-State has had a 100-yard receiver since Southern Illinois last year, which is such a long time, and it's such a good milestone. And I'm not sure how long it's been since we've had two 100-yard receivers. So
I saw somebody online say, well, so obviously it's true, that the last time it happened was 2017 against Central Arkansas, which I'm going to check the stats now. That would have been Byron Pringle and Isaiah Harris, who each had 3 catches for about 120 yards.
nice. So, that's good. Everyone else on the team may as well have not existed.
Yep.
And the incident, honestly, I would have been perfectly fine had the incident not occurred. The receivers would have gotten an A- from me, even if it was just Malik and Phillip Brooks. The incident had the potential to single-handedly murder that game. And I'm not talking in the sense of, oh, we needed that touchdown, because that's obvious. I more meant in the how demoralizing does that have to be for an offense, for a quarterback? You do everything right, and then just it fades away into nothing for no good reason. That really did have the potential. If Iowa State had the offensive capability of, I don't know, milquetoast, it would have probably turned the game on its head for us. Luckily for us, Iowa State is about as offensive as a Sesame Street episode. So it worked out. But good Lord. I just gave them a C. And the only time that I can think of that I've been as upset with an individual player, I'd have to go to the NFL and D Ford lining up offsides in the AFC Championship game.
That's a deep cut, man.
Like, that's the only time, and I'm not sure it's equal. Yeah. Next up is tight ends, fullbacks.
Yeah. Tight ends, fullbacks. This was a difficult grade in the opposite sense, in which they really didn't register many statistics at all. As an entire group, Ben Sinnott had 1 catch, and other than that, that was it. If you want to get into blocking, Ben Sinnott did a at least not noticeably bad job. Sammy Wheeler did miss a few blocks, and that was pretty frustrating. PFF gave him the worst offensive grade of the day. And then Will Swanson, he had a crucial false start penalty. Was actually the only offensive penalty in the game. And that really hurt. So I gave him a C, and honestly, it could have been worse, but they just didn't really have much of a factor. Christian Moore allegedly played a snap. I do not remember it.
I don't remember it. It might have been the kneel down.
That's actually probably it. That's probably it now I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, I ended up giving them a D plus just because even though Ben Sinnott wasn't noticeably bad, he wasn't good. Sammy Wheeler was noticeably bad.
Yeah.
And their relatively poor blocking performance mixed with only 5 yards of offensive production in a game that probably should have, well, I'm not going to say that had the potential to be a Ben Sinnott revenge game in a sense, because he's from Iowa. And I think that's probably what the unsportsmanlike was about on him after not the extra point, the field goal.
Yeah.
Because you're lying to yourself if you don't think this game meant a little extra to Ben Sinnott. But I ended up giving them a D plus because they didn't. add anything, really. Because that Ben Sinnott catch, just about anyone on the roster could have made that, receiver, running back. I don't know, maybe Will even could have made that catch. But I don't know. I just opened the door to the Will Howard tight end conversation. Anyway,
I don't want to go down that rabbit hole.
I don't either. Let's talk about the offensive line instead.
And offensive line, I feel like did not have a great day. This was one of their worst games of the year, in my opinion. Pass blocking was pretty rough, especially on the interior. KT Levison got beat pretty bad to the outside on one of the sacks. I mean, he just got absolutely eviscerated. Cooper Beebe was good in this game. Christian Duffy was good for the most part. A lot of the struggles were on the interior. I gave him a D plus in this game because the run game was just absolutely swallowed up completely. They really couldn't do much. Passing wise, Adrian was under, it felt like a lot of fire in this game. A rough performance, granted a tough, tall task for the offensive line. They brought a lot of pressure in this game, and there were a few times that they let it get home more than you'd like to see. And they were able to at least get a little bit going late. But and they were able to really push the piles a little bit more late whenever the defense was kind of worn down for Iowa State. But it was a rough way to get there for the offensive line. So D plus.
Yeah, I ended up giving them the exact same grade because to me the lone bright spot was Cooper Beebe, which granted that he's Cooper Beebe, of course he is, but well, I'm going to take this away from the takeaway segment. The interior is getting to be a problem. It's gone to the point of showing cracks and chinks in the armor to, okay, this is bad. Like Gilly, there's only the number one thing a quarterback hates is pressure from the center. And you think to yourself like, oh, well, that doesn't make much sense. Like you'd think it would be pressure from the edges because the edge players get most of the snap. You would be incorrect because most quarterbacks know that if there's pressure coming off the edge, the tackle will just kind of toss them backwards a little bit and they can step up. And that inevitably creates holes on the outside edges of the offensive line. So, in a sense, your tackles should still be your best offensive players and your most, athletic offensive linemen, I should say. But if your interior is getting pushed back into the quarterback's lap every time, where does the quarterback go? They can't go anywhere. And unfortunately, Gilly and Panzer both. Panzer had his worst game of the year, in my opinion. Panzer was not good. And, I expect better from them because I've seen better from them. And just the way the interior played outside of Cooper Beebe was bad. The tackles played fine. Cooper Beebe played great, as he always does. It averages out to a D plus because we were kind of getting worked in the running game. And it's not just by virtue of them being a disciplined defense. There were a few times that the offensive line was getting pushed into the lane, and you can't have that happen. I ended up giving them a D plus, and there's a lot of room for growth. And for the sake of my sanity, I'm attributing it to the offensive line being dinged up because every single week except for one, which was sort of the reset game against Tulane, the offensive line grades have gotten worse every single week. And I'm hoping that's attributed to injury and lack of depth because of injury.
Yeah. And that is something that does need to be mentioned is that the depth there is not great right now. And that we would probably be talking about the offensive line completely differently. Taylor Poitier had never gotten injured.
Yeah.
Because he was probably the second best lineman on this team, that other than Cooper Beebe. So, yeah, it's definitely rough. I don't like giving those bad grades, but got to be honest. But we can move on to defensive line, and this will be happier stuff because we did kind of talk poorly about a lot of the offense. Defensive line, I gave them an A. I felt like they did pretty well, especially considering Felix getting injured early ish and coming back, and then Nate Matlick still playing through injury as well. Though with that context taken into mind, and then also the defensive line seemingly getting better as the game went, especially in the run defense. Eli Huggins was great in run defense down the stretch. The defensive line as a whole was really good. Felix was still creating chaos on the edge, even if he only got to the quarterback once. I gave him an A. They've definitely had better performances, but they still were really good, and I really liked what they brought to the table in this game. Even though we have seen better from them, they get an A from me.
Yeah. I actually ended up changing my grade because I thought about it a little bit more. I ended up giving them an A minus. And the only reason why it's a minus is because there were a few times that I felt the pressure should have been converted into a sack. The number one thing that I'm thinking of is Nate Matlick, and I think he got, what was it, 26, 27 snaps or something like that. There was a time when he deposited the tackle firmly into Hunter Deckers's back, and it kind of like clips him a little bit, but Hunter Deckers moves up and away from it. That probably should have been a sack. Hunter Deckers should have been sacked more than 2 times this game. And he was pressured enough, but I really wanted to see at least 2 more sacks from this defensive line against an offensive line that is middling at best. But A minus for me. But the next 2 rooms, I'm not going to get into superlatives yet because you go first.
I'm going to give. I went back and forth between an A and an A plus for the linebackers, but I'm just going to go ahead and give them an A plus because I thought that they were outstanding. I mean, Austin Moore continues his reign of terror, as apparently the best defender on the team, out of absolutely nowhere. And Daniel Green was quite good as well. Had a QB hit. We brought him on a lot of interior rush, and I thought that he was good. But Austin Moore is really the highlight here. This is 6 tackles, a tackle for loss, and 2 pass breakups, including an incredible pass breakup that Ace got into further detail about earlier. I mean, and then Desmond Purnell comes in for the injured Khalid Duke and has a really great game that you can't really complain about. Beyond that, I don't have a ton to say just because they were so overwhelmingly positive. I felt like the middle of the field didn't really get too leaky at any point in the game. It was just really good scheming on the outside by Iowa State to get guys open, and most of that was the first quarter. So I'm not really worried about that at all. But yeah, the linebackers were excellent. This game, I gave them an A plus.
Yeah. I gave them the exact same grade. I Austin Moore is so ridiculously good. Desmond Purnell is such a pleasant surprise in what I thought was. I'm not going to lie to you. I thought Des Purnell was going to get exposed. I thought that he was going to get exposed, especially against an offense that really likes taking advantage on that particular part of the field where he played. And then he just gets, casually to PBUs, and he's constantly in the passing lanes, and even was playing good run support. I honestly think you could make an argument that Daniel Green was probably the weakest of the linebackers, and it wasn't because he was bad. It's because the other 2 were so good around him. To me, that is the textbook definition for a linebacker A plus performance. Less than 80 yards rushing, holding Hunter Deckers to less than 200 yards when their scheme is pretty much explicitly designed to attack the Sam linebacker position. There's nothing more to say. It's an A plus performance.
Yeah, they were absolutely outstanding in this game. Really, really great stuff from them. Defensive backs, I toyed with the idea of giving them an A plus, but I will give them an A. The only reason that I do that is because they were kind of leaky in the first quarter, but they did really settle down after that. So I can't quite give them an A plus. They definitely get an A plus in the second half, no doubt. But I give them an A for the rest of the game. As I recall, they didn't really have a like a big play in the second half that I was really concerned about in the passing game. But I felt like the defensive backs were really good. They did get a little lucky with Xavier Hutchinson dropping that big fourth down conversion, but I think that's just karma for the Malik Knowles fumble,
Yeah.
where that was just really bad luck for us. So I'm not going to really pin that against them. That's just kind of how football goes sometimes.
Yeah. I gave them an A plus because I one of the big questions was how are we going to handle the RPO style offense? And yes, Xavier Hutchinson ended up finishing with 100 yards receiving. Okay. Yeah, okay, I'll take that. If he's only getting 100 and he's like the only cog of their offense that works, fine.
And
I'll
no
take it.
touchdowns.
And no touchdowns. Echo is regaining the name Echo Island. So like, he's honestly going to play himself into getting drafted and not record like a single like, interception in his college career. He's going to play himself into getting drafted, not in his career, in the season. I He's going to play himself into getting drafted based off of that. Julius Brents had himself a good day. Like the outside corners had excellent days in an offense that is meant to, okay, you're playing off garbage, fine, take a speed in, take a slant. And then they just said, fine, you can have that. We're just going to tackle you and you're going to get like a yard. And a big part of that was Josh Hayes. And Josh Hayes coming down and making sure that, okay, you catch the ball, you're going to pay for it. You're not going to go anywhere afterwards. But I ended up giving him an A plus. And now we
Yeah.
can talk about Colin Klein, which this may be the most controversial segment of the day. You can go first, as always.
Yeah. I didn't really have issues with Colin Klein as a play caller. Yeah, I think he could have been better because I think you can always be better as a play caller because I mean, if you're perfect as a play caller, you're getting a touchdown every single play, assuming
Yeah.
perfect execution. But uh Colin Klein, I felt like called a good game. I think we had a good scheme going in, which was attack deep and try and open up run lanes. Offensive line just was not really performing super well. And we tried to adjust and just wasn't a lot working there. But we did enough offensively, and I felt like he was calling decent plays situationally. So I gave him a B plus for that. I can't give him higher, but I can't really justify going much lower either because I think that he really did call a solid game, and the offense just they just met a really, really difficult defense to deal with. And, you know, you're not going to have a phenomenal game every single time. We only had the one real explosive play, well, two technically, I guess, but um, I would like to see more sustained drives than that going forward, but I would say he's probably not the best team to test that against. So B plus for me.
I ended up giving him a C plus. And the main reason why it's so low is okay, it's not just because we had like a third and inches and he lined up in shotgun. That did make me angry. That made me irrationally angry, and it will do it. It doesn't matter if I hate the team that's doing it. That will make me irrationally angry every single time it happens. So he's not getting docked for that. Yes, he is, but he's not. It's not like a significant letter grade thing. The thing is with me is that with Colin Klein, as it stands right now, a lot of his plays seem to be setting up something without having the counterpunch for it. And this is something that I've quietly been noticing, but it seemed really bad today. Because whenever something gets figured out and they're playing it properly, that's when you implement the counterpunch to keep them honest. And the number one thing that I'm noticing with it is that whenever we're running QB power, yeah, we got 98. It was, Adrian had 98 yards on the ground.
77.
77. Where did I get 98?
It might have been, I think he had about that number. He had 97 before losses.
Oh, okay. So yeah, he ends up with, pretty good numbers off of his running ability. But once they started figuring out QB power, I'm like, okay, they're selling out to get QB power. Here's where you set up, like a pop pass, for example, or you set up just a little swing screen to the opposite side of the action that you're running to, or even to the same side of the action, so that way you can spread out the defense laterally. And he's just not setting up, like he's not using the counterpunch. He has it set up, and this is a game that if we had the counter punches with the QB powers, or we use a little bit more of action off of sweep when they're selling out for the run, we probably get a few more yards. I'm not saying that, oh well, if Colin Klein calls, like if he calls the counter punches every single time, this is like a 35-6 game, because it's not. I'm not stupid. I know that that's not how it would have worked. But still, to me, there were times that I just wanted him for not the play call literally, but to have that counter. It's like, okay, you're going to sell it against QB power. Okay, I'll send Send it up the seam, and he'll run for 30 yards. Oh, you're expecting send it up the seam? That's fine. I'll run QB power.
I agree with that. I agree with that. It definitely is concerning that there hasn't been the counter punch yet from Klein. I'll chalk it up for now to growing pains, but that should be something that he has figured out by this point. And he seemingly has been getting more consistent as the season's progressed. I would say it seems like we're kind of adding as we go right now, and he's kind of getting, I think, more confident in his play calling. Like this week, we saw more deep shots in this game, and we've basically seen the entire season combined. So I was happy about that. But yeah, it's definitely going to be concerning going forward if, like you said, we don't have the counter punch. That's actually exactly what I was expecting. The example you used, the QB power seam ball. I've thought of that, and I've also seen other people bring that up as well. So that's a common thought, I think, is we're setting up QB power. When are we going to deploy the thing to make the defense pay for stacking the box and completely committing to the QB power? Maybe there's a read there and the defense just isn't quite fully committing when we're facing them. And if they are, then maybe Adrian's just not seeing it and that punch is there. But we won't know until we try it. Or unless we go the whole season without doing it, then we'll know.
Yeah, then we'll have a pretty good idea.
Yeah, but Colin Klein is definitely aware that that play exists because K-State definitely won a few games off of it in the mid 20 teens. Thinking like 2014 OU, we definitely won that game because of a Glenn Gronkowski, like RPO, like pop pass kind of thing. We've done that multiple times in the past. So Colin Klein is aware that play exists, assuming his long-term memory is intact. But
okay. That may be tough.
I have had concussions. I can make that joke.
I'm not gatekeeping CTE jokes from you. That's not my place.
Only I can make CTE jokes on this podcast.
Until you forget, you have to tell them.
Wait, what?
Defensive coordinator.
Yeah, defensive coordinator Claremont. I mean, the defense was great, other than a kind of leaky first quarter, as we keep saying. But I mean, we held Iowa State to 9 points at home. It was the first time they had lost at home at night in 5 years, which is kind of like an ESPN statistic, but but still, I gave them an A. The defense was great. They limited the things that they were good at, and they prevented them from exploiting things that maybe they traditionally aren't as good at. I mean, we held them to 78 rushing yards, Hunter Deckers. even if he's not great, which I don't think he is, he can still get a high volume of yardage. But his completion percentage wasn't phenomenal. Didn't have any touchdowns, which is the big thing there. And a lot of his yards were safety blanket yards to Xavier Hutchinson, and Xavier Hutchinson going out and doing Xavier Hutchinson things. So I really thought the defense was spectacular, and Kleinerman gets an A, I guess an A plus for that. I should give him an A plus for that, but yeah, A plus for me.
I gave him an A plus. If I wanted to be like, if I really wanted to be that guy, I'm like, oh, call Blitz zero more because Hunter Deckers sucks. But like, if that's the case, no one ever gets an A plus, and people would be struggling to get an A on a consistent basis if I were going to be that guy. That's not no. They get an A plus, and it's yeah.
Yeah, phenomenal stuff from Joe Kleinerman.
Yep. So next up, we'll quickly answer the pregame questions. Does Iowa State freshman kicker have a repeat performance at KU? No.
No, he did not. He was nails.
Didn't matter, but he was nails. Actually, yes, it did matter, but no, it mattered a lot.
Yeah, I was just waiting for the other shoe to drop with him, and it just never did.
Yeah.
I guess maybe the other shoe that dropped was Matt Campbell getting flamed by his fan base because he blamed the fans for allegedly yeah, like being upset with the kicker online, but I didn't really see a ton of that, I don't think, especially because he was a freshman. They were kind of taking it easy for Iowa State standards. So I mean, I don't know. Matt Campbell was being real weird after that game.
he's a weirdo, but
he is a strange guy.
Can K-State force Deckers to be uncomfortable? Yeah, we did that pretty well.
I would agree. Yeah, we did a solid job with that. Even though we only got 2 sacks, we were getting at least creating some pressure a lot of the time. And post first quarter, he didn't look particularly comfortable most of the game.
Yeah, he looked like Hunter Deckers for most of the game.
Go figure.
How does Klein choose to attack what is essentially the same defense K-State runs? Deep.
Going deep, unfortunately. Well, we should have had 2 touchdowns out of it. We only get 1.
Probably should have had 3 if Cade doesn't get held there because notorious deep threat Cade Warner.
Yeah. I will say I felt like that was a generous PI call. I felt like I was holding. But
it was probably holding more than PI, but I take those.
No, I mean I take it. Like I'm not upset about it because it was a penalty either way. I just thought it was going to be holding.
Yeah.
I mean, again, not upset. It really didn't make much of a difference. But yeah, Cade did somehow get open deep. But yeah, deep passes.
Can Kleinerman find a way to defend deep crossers and drag routes? LMAO, what deep crossers? And then the drag routes, yes.
Yeah, the drags did not play as much of a factor in this game as I thought. Iowa State seemed to adjust by trying to go intermediate until Austin Moore said no. And they didn't really live over the middle as much as I thought that they would. They really went either screens and like really short stuff or like hitches, it felt like, and then like some like 10-yard outs and 15-yard outs and stuff like that, going for the intermediate. But yes, Kleinerman did find a way to defend deep crossers and drags.
How much pressure does K-State opt to bring on a play-by-play basis? It varied a lot, but most of the time it was like 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Which I think is ideal.
Yeah. I think that's about what we expected as well. Again, like you said, could have lived with a little bit more. But especially because when we brought pressure, Deckers just absolutely lost his mind. Like when we brought 6, it was like you could see him panic from the broadcast. So I would have liked to see more, but 4 to 5 just to at least leave a little bit more back defensively was fine. So not gonna like get upset about it or anything.
The matchup between Julius Brents and Xavier Hutchinson, who wins more? Here's the funny thing. That was not the exclusive matchup, and honestly, it wasn't a matchup that I saw as much as I thought we would.
Yeah, there was a concerted effort from Iowa State to get Xavier Hutchinson off of Julius Brents, which I cannot blame them because Julius Brents was kind of the guy to really match up with Xavier Hutchinson. They put Xavier, especially in the first quarter, on Josh Hayes, but then Josh Hayes decided after like the first drive to not allow it anymore. And so then they just kind of had to move around Xavier a bit more. Then Xavier also got in his own way by the end of the game more than anything. So there's that.
Who wins the turnover battle?
Iowa State.
Technically, Iowa State
It
because
did
of the
not matter.
incident.
The incident. It did not matter, but they did win.
Honestly, at this point, I may just call the episode "Overcoming the Incident." So next up is MVPs. I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on offense. It's Adrian.
It is Adrian. He was responsible for the one touchdown, as well as Phillip Brooks taking it to the end zone, and Cade Warner, Cade Warner helping to escort him by putting his arms out and not letting people run by him. So shout out Cade.
Defensive MVP, I think, is interesting because there are three names in particular that I think you could make a pretty convincing argument for. Josh Hayes, Austin Moore, and then Eli Huggins. I think he's probably the biggest sleeper of the three.
Yeah.
I'm going to pick Josh Hayes because he was my pregame pick. There's no other reason for that. I just like, it's because he had the most tackles and he was everywhere on the field at once.
That is true, yeah. I'm going to go with Austin Moore for the massive pass deflection, having another TFL. Did not have anywhere near as many tackles as Josh Hayes because Josh Hayes just outpaced everybody in that area. But Austin Moore had a really, really great day. He has yet to have a bad day as a K-State starting linebacker. So I will assume he will never have a bad day until we see proof otherwise. So knock on wood for Austin Moore, I guess. But great day for Austin. And you can't go wrong with either of those guys at the top.
Yep. So now we can start talking about the takeaways. And again, Cardiac Cats, baby, we will fight through adversity every single week. There are no easy games for K-State.
I would rather we just win normally.
Yeah, I would rather we win normally too, but that's not how we roll.
Unfortunately not. It's not good for my long-term health. I guess I'll just have to deal with it to get the ultimate satisfaction of victory. But I would prefer that we find a way to win in less dramatic fashion.
Yeah. Next up, we've been talking about how, the mob is back, how this defense is really good. I'm going to put a number on it now. This is a top 15, and you could make an argument for a top 10 defense in FBS and definitely top 10 in Power 5. And it's just because what Iowa State has in scheme cohesion and Baylor has in talent, K-State has the Goldilocks of both, to where they have good talent and good scheme cohesion. If we had Iowa State's scheme cohesion, we may just finish like second in the country in defense the entire year. I truly believe that. But as of right now, this is probably the second best defense in the conference, fighting with it from Okie State. But yeah, it's insane, this defense.
Yeah, this defense is absolutely excellent. The only thing on my major wish list is more depth at non-defensive back positions because we are pretty deep at defensive back. I feel like I'd like more linebacker depth. I'd like more defensive end depth. We're actually probably fine in nose tackle, which is weird to say because we were very concerned about that in the offseason. But we're fine there. But yeah, this defense is great. They've been great. The only time they really had a rough-ish game was OU, and that was full power OU before they were broken, I guess.
Before we broke them.
Yeah, and then pre-Dylan Gabriel destruction.
How are they -9 against KU?
I do not get it unless Dylan Gabriel's back, because I think we saw this week that Dylan Gabriel really is the engine that actually makes that offense work because the backups are not there. Granted, when Jackson Arnold gets there, it might be different. But it was a rough showing from the backup QB Belleville or Bevel or whatever it is. But Yeah, great K-State defense.
Yeah. Next up, we handled the best. This is Iowa State's the best defense we're going to see. And the only thing that will keep us from scoring at least like 3 scores, in my opinion, every single game would be ourselves. This is the best defense that we're going to face, and we handled it not good. We handled it okay. And that's more encouraging to me from a first-year coordinator than just about anything else could be.
Yeah, we didn't have a phenomenal game, but we did what we needed to do. In fact, just enough. Um, and we could have had more. We left points on the field. We left 10 points on the field with the missed field goal and the fumble. So could have had a bit more production. But yeah, we definitely could have done better, but we did not. So I'm not gonna harp on it too much, but this is the best defense we'll see. So
Yeah.
all around solid performance.
Yep. We already talked about the interior offensive line. And the last one is the bye week has come at a great time because the injuries have piled up. And this, good Lord, we need this bye week, especially going into the absolute assassination that we're about to face of this
Yeah.
upcoming Big 12 schedule.
This team desperately needed a break, just to heal up. Yeah, because they've got at TCU coming up, and then they have Oklahoma State at home, which if K State beats TCU, that might be a top 10 matchup.
And
And
that
then
might
they
be
have
game
Texas.
day. Like they might
That would
take
have a shot.
they may take game day away from Happy Valley if Penn State loses and Okie State and K State both end up
Yeah,
like at very least, if we don't get game day, we may get Big Noon, assuming Michigan doesn't take it for like the 6th straight week.
yeah. And honestly, if TCU hadn't just had it, we'd have a shot at it. If like Syracuse were to lose for the TCU game. Um, unless they went to like Oklahoma State, Texas. Texas wins again. I guess Mississippi State's getting up there, but we would at least be in the conversation for game day with TCU. Probably wouldn't get it, but we'd be in that talk as one of the better ranked matchups that week. But yeah, bye week, really need it.
Yeah. So next week is the bye week, as we just said, but then the week after that is TCU, a TCU team that they're dangerous. They woke up feeling a little bit dangerous.
Yeah, Quentin Johnston is not a human being. I think
No, he's an alien.
we did a pretty solid job against him last year. Honestly,
Yeah, we did.
granted, that TCU team did not look like it cared about that game at all. So
Nope.
that's not going to be a fair representation of how it goes this year. It's going to be a very difficult game. We don't have, as of recording, a kick time or network. I think we'll get that tomorrow, which will be release day, Monday the 10th, because that'll be 2 weeks out, which is generally when they release that information. I would imagine that's going to be a big network. I imagine we're on ESPN, ABC, Fox for that, because if you go through the week 8 big matchups, the ranked matchups right now are UCLA, Oregon, Alabama, Mississippi State, Oklahoma State, Texas, and then Clemson, Syracuse. So K-State has a very good shot at getting another really good time slot and another good network for that matchup. So we'll know tomorrow. But the only other Big 12 game competing is Oklahoma State, Texas, which that might be a big noon contender. So yeah, maybe that. And then UCLA, Oregon, probably going to be either mid-afternoon or like a late night
Pac-12
like
after dark.
half after dark thing. They'll probably stick it in prime time just because it'll be like 5 p.m. on the West Coast, but we'll see.
Yeah. So basically, what I'm hearing is we're gonna, TCU, K-State enjoy 11 a.m. at ESPN
Yeah,
Plus.
I wouldn't mind an ABC game. I feel like it's been ages since we've been on ABC. We used to be on ABC quite a bit, like in 2012 when we had that great run. But we shall see. I just like the aesthetics of ABC and the camera quality, but
Yeah. But before we wrap up, do you have any last notes for what you want to say about the Iowa State game?
One of the most frustrating wins of all time, but a win is a win.
Yeah, we take those.
Absolutely.
But yeah, that pretty much wraps up this episode of the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. Thank you all so much for listening. If you want to contact the show, you can follow us on Twitter at Aggieville Alleycats. That's capital A, and capital C in cats. If you want to email us, we're aggievillealleycats@gmail.com. If you want to follow us on a more personal note, I am at ACEdwards00.
I am at Connor Baltazar, capital C, capital B.
And if you want to support the show financially, please be sure to check out the official Aggieville Alleycats merch store, where you can find such designs as the staff-approved Doomtang Clan, Play Sandstorm Cowards, and Neon Alleycats. But most importantly, thank you all for listening to this episode of the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. Where come rain, shine, or anything in between, we're here to deliver to you the Kansas State sporting news that you so love. Stay safe, Alleycats.